Hi everyone, my name is Amanda, and I'm going to just take about 5 minutes of your time to discuss with you the social injustice and environmental controversy of the Flint, Michigan water crisis that had an impact on the Black community. The first thing that you need to know is, why does this matter? Why is this what we're talking about today? Social justice is a concept of fair and just relations between an individual and the society that they live in. It's measured by the distribution of wealth, opportunities for personal activity, and for the social things that they want to do. So when we're talking about social justice, we're basically describing the measure of distribution of opportunities for their wealth, for their socioeconomic status, for the entire life that they live. Unfortunately, what happened in the Flint, Michigan water crisis shows us that it's the exact opposite. So it would be social injustice because it is not equal. So let's talk about what happened here. What's the background of this story about the water crisis in Flint, Michigan? It is titled The Flint Water Crisis for many different reasons. It was in April of 2014. What happened was the city of Flint, Michigan temporarily was planning on changing the water source in order to save money. And what they did was the water treatment plant, the Detroit Water and Sewer Plant, was the primary source of their water, of their drinking water, their bathing water, things like that. And what they did was they switched the primary source from that to getting the new water from the Flint River. And unfortunately, the water directly from the Flint River is not treated, and it was contaminated with lead. This is a pretty interesting graph from Azavea in 2017 that estimates the residential tap water lead levels in Flint, Michigan. If you look at this graph, it shows you from blue to red, the lower levels of lead to the highest. So, is this social injustice? Yes, without a doubt. If you look at the definition for environmental racism, it refers to the way in which minority group neighborhoods, which are typically primarily populated by people who are of color or of a lower socioeconomic status, are the ones that are burdened with disproportionate number of living near hazardous facilities and practices, such as toxic waste facilities, garbage dumps, landfills, and other sources of environmental pollution, foul odors, all of these things that impact having a lower quality of life. There was a study done in 2016 that found that there was a consistent pattern of over a 30-year period of placing hazardous waste facilities in neighborhoods that are primarily Black and primarily poorer people. We've already kind of glazed over the population distribution for this social injustice of environmental racism. Who this primarily impacts are Black individuals and Black communities. Those communities are typically the ones that have more of an impact of living in hazardous zones. That does not mean that other minority races and ethnicities are not impacted by environmental racism, but the most common one are Black individuals and Black communities. It is also population distributed to cities that live in poverty. This specific city, Flint, Michigan, is 40% in poverty. So that means that it is one of the largest cities living in poverty in the United States. So the bigger question is what is the cause of this? Why does this keep happening? Inequities are not naturally occurring. They are human constructed. Just like racism is a social construct These inequities are not natural. We as humans and humankind are building this into our society and have been for years. This is something that keeps going. In this example specifically, they did not care about the impact that their actions would have. They knew that the water was contaminated and that it was dangerous for them to change the water source. But knowing the community around it lived in poverty and knowing that the community around it were primarily Black individuals, this did not make them change their mind about going through with this project. The negative impacts from this crisis, as well as the negative impacts from environmental racism in the first place, are countless. But let's start with the impacts that it had directly on the water. The water source was changed to the Flint River, and the river water was not treated with anything to protect individuals from the dangers in the water. So the water was foul-smelling, it was discolored, and it tasted poor. So the individuals knew that there was something wrong with the water and that could make them sick. This is just an image from Detroit Metro Times just to show you guys the difference in the water in Flint and the water in Detroit. So as you can see, the water in Flint is very discolored and very dangerous looking. So even though the water looked, tasted, and smelled funny, the individuals had no choice but to use that water. So what ended up happening was there were physical impacts. People started developing skin rashes. Their skin started itching from where they had bathed in this water. They started losing their hair. There were also long-term impacts of using this water. Between 6,000 and 12,000 children had doubled blood levels. That is absolutely not safe. In addition to the lead poisoning, there was also a Legionnaire's outbreak. Legionnaire's is a bacteria that's found in water, and this killed 12 individuals and impacted almost 90. Here we see kind of a comedic relief cartoon from East Bay Times, a newspaper article showing us a glass of water from Flint, Michigan, joking that it's a toxic cocktail. But if you look and see what's in this compared to what we've discussed, there's absolutely truth to every joke. Some more of the long-term impacts that people faced from the lead poisoning and the Legionnaires in the water source from Flint, Michigan was anemia, kidney damage, and brain damage. In addition to that, pregnant women who were carrying infants, those babies' nervous systems can be impacted by their mothers drinking and using the water. So if you think about it, this did not impact only the generation of people that were drinking the water, it impacted future generations as well. The social injustice of environmental racism that occurred in Flint, Michigan does not end as soon as the water is cleared. Basically, racism hurts forever. So even though this specific situation does seem to be clearing and getting better, the racism and environmental racism that happened has not disappeared. It has absolutely caused long-term mental health struggles from the stress that these individuals encountered because of the racism situation that happened there. People are fearful of this repeating itself or similar circumstances happening because our government has not done much to change the fact that Black communities are typically living near these hazardous sites. This keeps cycling through generations, learned behaviors. It is in our society as a social construct to be racist. And unfortunately, this doesn't seem to be changing much, so even 10 generations from now will still be impacted by this. And there are physical ailments through these people's lives. People who were impacted from this water crisis 5 to 6 years ago are still struggling with the physical changes and health hazards that have happened to them. And those most definitely get passed down to their children and their families as well. So now that you know the story and you know what happened, you know how environmental racism impacts our society, let's talk about what we can do about that. There are institutional changes that need to happen. In the United States, even though laws governing the treatment of oppressed racial and ethnic groups have changed, unfortunately the deep roots of institutionalized racism have not changed. Unfortunately, this is still something that we deal with every single day, which brings us to our next point. Whether public or private organizations are rooted in the same inequalities as the rest of the U.S. societal institutions, those organizations, even if it's unintentionally, even if it's implicit, function as tools of oppression. So even though they're not meaning to, the people of power, so to speak, such as our government, are the ones that are allowing this awful distreatment and unequal treatment and social injustice of our Black communities. Speaking of solutions, the majority of you are probably thinking, well, I don't work for the government. I don't matter. I can't make a change, just little old me. But that's not true. There are personal lifestyle changes that each individual person can do to have an impact on this, a positive one. You can be knowledgeable about social justice and what that means and how we can strive to get to that. You can be aware of racism and the impacts that it has on people and even the impacts that it has on you. Understand and be accountable for your own implicit biases. Every single person of every single race, of every single ethnic group does have implicit biases about other individuals that come from a different culture or background of their own. And if we can be aware of those and understand and hold ourselves accountable for those, then we can start changing them. And lastly, advocate for yourself and advocate for others. Not everyone understands and has the knowledge that you do after this program. So please be sure that you advocate for yourself and that you advocate for other people and explain to people what environmental racism is, how this impacted the people of Flint, Michigan, how it could impact a city near you. Do the best that you can to help yourself understand the personal changes that you can make, because I promise you, it does make a difference.